There's a lot of pros and cons at the centre of Last of Us Part 2, but what really overshadows all of this game is a very controversial storyline that a lot of people are not on board with. One of them people, I think, is being myself. However, that cannot stop us acknowledging the ingenuity of Naughty Dog creating a game with potentially the best gameplay and the best visuals of all time. Welcome to another video, guys, and in this video I'm going to be reviewing The Last of Us Part 2, a video that I really wanted to make, but it's been very rushing through my mind as to what I actually think of this game. It's been a really hard battle within my head as to whether or not I actually like this game or not. And I'm going to quickly summarise that. I think this game is pretty amazing, but the storyline is not. It's not a bad storyline, it's just an unconventional, dark storyline that I think doesn't resonate with a lot of people, and rightly so, because it shouldn't resonate with anybody because of how dark it is. Taking a step back and looking at it, we can appreciate what Naughty Dog are trying to tell us, but ultimately it is the hindrance of the game. But I don't want to speak too much on the storyline. This video is going to be completely spoiler free, or mostly. There's only one spoiler I have to give because you cannot review the game without giving away this spoiler, which is coming in now. The spoiler is that there is another playable character, and you play as this character for 10 hours, and you cannot review the game without acknowledging this. So all these reviewers who were reviewing the game before the game was released, and they had this embargo saying that they, couldn't speak about playing as Abby, the other character. I understand now how hard it would have been for those reviewers to actually give a review, and I understand why a lot of them talked about how they didn't like the story but they couldn't speak about it. But before I delve into the story too much, I want to talk about a lot of other aspects. So before I really dig into this, please like and subscribe and turn on that notification bell. I just want to start by saying that The Last of Us, or The Last of Us Part 1, we may have to call it now, for me is up there with my top 3 games of all time. It really pushed the boundaries of gameplay, of graphics, visuals, acting and gameplay for me. It was a 10 out of 10. It was across the board phenomenal. And on that, The Last of Us Part 2 improves on a lot of things. Now I want to start with the visuals. This game looks stunning. We cannot take that away from it. It is the best visually looking game probably on console at the moment. The only game that I think comes close to it is Red Dead Redemption 2 in terms of character designs. They work with a lot of different things. The level designs are different. Red Dead covers obviously bigger terrains, bigger map area, and The Last of Us Part 2 is more concise, but because of this, everything is so much more detailed. And I think you can't dispute how good this game looks, and I think a lot of the criticisms come in relation to the story once again, and I think in those videos we don't appreciate how well Naughty Dog have created this game, because we expected it to be so good, with Uncharted 4, with Lost Legacy and The Last of Us, these phenomenal looking games, some of the best looking games for their times. People don't appreciate that, and I think maybe they appreciate it but they don't mention it in the reviews, so I just want to get it out there. This is a phenomenal looking game, truly amazing, and they deserve credit for the world they've created. Now, the combat. The combat is significantly improved since the first one. In my opinion, the first one was pretty good. And when I say pretty good, I mean excellent. And I'm going to go as far to say that The Last of Us Part 2 is the best gameplay that you can get for a third-person game, and I'm going to go out there as far to say that it's probably some of the best gameplay you can get on any console in history at the moment. Fight me on that if you want, but that is my opinion. And I found a lot of people in the reviews were criticising the combat, saying that it was a bit bland and a bit boring, and I honestly kept thinking to myself, if you think this combat is boring and basic, then please give me an example of a complex system that beats this. Because I can't really think of any that's on par with this. It improves a lot more, and I think there's a criticism of the dodge aspect, and I think that was something that Last of Us missed out a bit. Basically, if you were in combat in The Last of Us Part 1, you're going to take blows, whereas in this one, you have the opportunity to try and avoid them. The combat is just as brutal and as heavy as it was in the first one, and I think taking control of Ellie for the majority of the game, probably about 60 to 65% of the game, she plays a lot differently to Joel. She's a lot lighter, she's a lot smaller, she can't handle as much confrontation in melee damage and in one-to-one confrontations unless she's got a melee weapon, unless she's armed. Even with a little switchblade, she can't. It's hard to take people down in one-to-one combat. So I really, really like that part, and I want to speak about one particular part. Basically, I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I was fleeing from a big encounter. I jumped down into this basement and I ended up fighting somebody with an axe, and I didn't have a melee weapon, and it was the most intense moment of the game that I played. And I was dodging and I just couldn't get away from, couldn't get enough space, and I almost died. I was on so much low health, everything was shaking, I was so intense, and I finally managed to get a little bit amount of space and then put a few bullets into his chest and bring him down. And for me, that sort of summed up the combat. It created cinematic moments that you create yourself, so everybody's going to experience different ongoing battles in the game. Every single encounter can be played so many different times in so many different ways. You create your own epic battles, which I think isn't done that well in many other games, and I think that's something that Naughty Dog, again, props to them for their combat system, because it's so fluid. Now, as I want to say, there is a bit of a spoiler. As I've already mentioned, you play as a second character called Abby. Now, I don't want to talk about this yet, but basically she plays a lot like Joel from the first one. She's quite a well-stacked woman, and she doesn't have a switch knife, and she uses shivs like Joel did in the first one. She has different weapons, which again I liked as well, that they both had similar but different weapons, and she is a different character, a different kettle of fish to play with. She's a lot more heavier, she's a lot stronger, she can take more damage, and I like this change of combat only. When I'm referring to Abby's sections, I thought the combat was good, and I actually think people were a bit unfair with this because people just didn't like Abby as a character, but I think she did have some of the best level design in the game, especially this level when you go down a hotel, and it is so intense. There's so much going on. Every floor has a different enemy in it, and it is brutal, and it is really, really good. Which brings me on again to the next part, which is there's more infected types. So we've got the stalkers in the game now, which apparently they were in The Last of Us Part 1. I don't really remember them. There definitely wasn't stalker parts, sections of stalkers in the first game. But in this game, the stalker moments are so intense because they don't show up when you use your, whatever it's called, your hunter vision or whatever. And, you have to literally look around for them, and it's intense. They jump out and attack you, and they run and hide, and it is so intense, and it's brilliant. And I think, as well as that, there's so much more variation in this game compared to the first one. We've got infected versus humans, we've got humans versus humans. We've got areas when you can set infected off. You can draw infected out to fight each other, to fight other humans. There's so much going on, and every combat scenario is different, and I really like that variation. And as well, the humans were different as well. They're so much smarter, and they had their dogs as well, which meant it was harder to hide. My only criticism of the combat is that I felt like I played the game on medium, the middle difficulty, and I felt like there's sections of the game which aren't built for stealth. Now, in The Last of Us Part 1, I think I played it about 5 times through now, but I played it on easy, on normal, I played it on grounded, and I finished it on grounded. And playing Last of Us Part 2 felt like, especially some of the earlier on sections with Ellie and the later on sections with Ellie, that the stealth was really difficult because of the dogs and because of how many enemies there were, and because enemies were a lot smarter. It was a lot harder to use stealth, and that might have just been me, because I had all this ammo and I just wasn't afraid to go for it. But it's not necessarily a criticism. I think if you want to do stealth, you could do stealth. And also as well, I'd like to say, weapons wise, the weapons are good variation. However, I found on the normal difficulty, I found the bow and arrow and the silenced pistol to be a bit too much overpowered. There's too much pistol ammo everywhere. You could always find pistol ammo, and I had no problem finding enough stuff to craft a silencer, which meant that you could literally go around picking people's heads off for quite a while. But then later on in the game, as the enemies became more frequent and became more numbers, it was a lot harder to pick them off. But initially, the bow and arrow is very overpowered, and even in the later stages of the game, the armoured enemies, the bow and arrow was still a one-shot kill with a bow, which I found not really realistic, because it just wouldn't be the case. It would probably maybe go through body armour, but not enough to kill somebody. Continuing on with the combat a little bit more, not the combat, sorry, the gameplay. There's a few little puzzles which I enjoyed. There's been criticisms that they're a bit basic, but no, I think the puzzles for me help break up the gameplay. I think it's paced quite well throughout, and these little puzzles, they're just a good little simple puzzle to sort of break away the combat, because sometimes it can be very combat heavy, especially with Ellie. From maybe hours 8 to 12, it's very heavy on combat. But overall, it's pretty phenomenal, the combat. We cannot take away from how good the gameplay is to play, how good it feels, how fluid it is. Which also brings me on to the next part, which is the level design. I think the level design needs to be spoken about because it is so good. It's so open. It's not like The Last of Us where it was a lot more linear. It's kind of like Uncharted 4 if you played Uncharted 4, but times 3 or 4. There's so much going on. There's so many buildings you can go through. Every sort of encounter is like an open map, and it just is so well done. There's so many different levels to each encounter. So much stuff to traverse. There's just so much stuff going on, and I think it really takes the cake, and they've really put the effort in. And I think we cannot disregard how well Naughty Dog have made this game, how well they've made the combat, and how well they've made the level design. And for me, those things alone would have made it a 10 out of 10. However, now we're going to swoop in with the story, my opinion of the story. Now, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm going to make a separate video about my opinion of the story. So this is going to be a brief overview without any spoilers, okay? In a nutshell, I didn't enjoy the story too much. Okay, this game is based around revenge, but it's not just based around revenge. The first game had a lot about redemption. In the first game, it was about Joel, reconnecting with his lost feelings, reconnecting with people, and redeeming himself. He'd done bad things at the beginning of the game, and he'd redeemed himself by what he'd done with Ellie. Now, what he did at the end, we can debate. Was he redeeming at the end or not? That's for debate. And this game does touch a bit on redemption, and it tries to redeem certain characters. However, these characters do horrible things. And I have to say, Abby does some horrible, dirty, just downright evil things in this game. And it makes you play as her for 10, 11 hours, and you know what, they really try and push her on you, and I just didn't like her as a person because of what she'd done, and she'd done so much evil that it was hard to justify and redeem her. Naughty Dog, there's been criticism that you spent too much time with her. I don't think that's the case, because what Naughty Dog wanted us to feel was us to understand that in this horrible world, people do horrible things, but they're still good at heart. And people are redeemed by their actions. So people can do something horrible, and then you can redeem yourself. And that is what they wanted to try and tell you with Abby. That is that she may be this horrible person, but she can be redeemed, and she's going to try and redeem herself by her actions in the story. And they give it a good go, if I'm being honest. They introduced other characters, and you sort of, for me, I sort of understood what she was doing. But at the same time, I still couldn't forgive her for what she'd done. And that was me. I had a lot of trouble digesting this, because I thought, was it just me? Am I being, slightly emotionally unavailable? Am I just holding a grudge because of the things she'd done? I understand how characters would have felt in relation to her. I could put myself in their shoes, and I really just wanted her to die. And I just couldn't get over what she'd done. And because of that really made me feel fuel for hatred, but it also helped me understand what everyone else was feeling at the time, and why people were making these actions, and why the revenge was so strong, why the need for the vengeance was so overpowering, because I personally felt it myself. And to say that, Naughty Dog really, really instilled some emotion within me, and really brought out so much thought and reaction from myself, that I struggle to say that it's a bad story, because it made me question morality so much. Is it right to want revenge when it means it sets off chain reactions of more vengeance, and it's a never-ending cycle for no end? Is it worth doing? Is it necessary? What is right and what is wrong? Are the people's actions evil or not, or justified when they've been at the end of a serious action that's caused them so much pain? So for that, I can't give Naughty Dog too much negativity for making me feel these things and question my own morality. And to be honest, I've never had a video game make me think about these things to such a high level. I've read books that make me feel like this, yes, and I've watched movies and TV series, but never a game. So on that level, you have to give them credit for how much emotion they've instilled within the game. So when people had a criticism with the end of the story that it seems pointless, and it seems like there was no closure, and I agree, but the problem with that is I sometimes think, well, we're Naughty Dog. Is that not the point they were trying to make? That, you're right, it was all pointless. Because sometimes that is the world that they were in. People killing each other for revenge, for survival, but ultimately, what does it mean? Does it mean anything? Well, that's for us as viewers to decide. And it was a very difficult one to decide. That's all I'm going to say, because I feel like I've spoke very loosely about it without ruining anything for the game. I think so anyway. Okay guys, if you want to see me talk more about the the loss and the morality and the actual ending of the game and what I thought, talking about spoilers, there'll be a link in the video for my spoiler related review at some point. Obviously give me a week from the launch date, actually launch of this video, to make it. But now I'm just going to summarise, guys. It's been quite a long video, and because there's a lot to say on this game, I haven't even said half of what I'm feeling. I've sort of went off script massively with this video because there's just so much to say. It embarked so much emotion, so much thought process from myself, that I had to make this video with you all, and I had to share it with you guys, and I want to know what your opinion is. This game has been getting review bombed massively. Over 80,000 people reviewed this on Metacritic, which is about 5 times as much as Red Dead got and God of War got in their 2-year-old games. And I think it's a bit unfair. Just because you don't like the story means you give the game a 1 out of 10, because it's not a 1 out of 10. The gameplay, the visuals alone make this game an 8 or 9 out of 10 in my opinion. Just because you didn't like the story, because I don't think the story is necessarily bad. I think Naughty Dog were trying to tell a story, and they were trying to make you think and question about the decisions of the characters. But it's quite a complex requirement, and a lot of people don't want to think about this sort of stuff in a video game. But it's Naughty Dog's game, it's Naughty Dog's story. We'll have to respect that. So to summarise, the combat and the gameplay in this game is phenomenal. It is the best out there, I think. There's no game that tops it. Visually, it is probably up there with the top couple games. Level design is phenomenal. Audio is phenomenal. The characters in this game are not as strong as they are in the first game. They introduce a lot of characters which are just hard to relate to. They actually introduced a few characters who I actually enjoyed, which I'll speak to more in the spoiler review video. But ultimately, it's not as good as the first one. It isn't. It is not. And is it a disappointing end to the series? Or I don't think there'll be a third. It just seems like it actually has ended. When I think about the storyline of this game, I sometimes think, is this the best story Naughty Dog could have told? They would have thought about hundreds of different storylines they wanted to tell for this game. I personally don't think it is the best story they could have told. I think, without spoiling it, which I'm not going to, they could have told a different, better story. But that is just my opinion, and I'm sure you have a similar or different opinion, which is fine. Continue with my summary, because I keep going off on tangents on this video, because it's just a video of me talking about how I feel and about my opinion of this game. The storyline for me, it does let it down a little bit. Abby is a hard character to relate to. Her gameplay is actually just as good as Ellie's, but unfortunately, because of her actions, I personally couldn't forgive her for her heinous crimes against other characters. So because of that, I didn't like it, and I found the ending to be okay. A bit emotional, but again, it wasn't the fact that the ending for the game isn't the ending I didn't want. I didn't want that ending, correct, but I also didn't want the second half of the game either. So it's sort of like the story, the ending of the game isn't my issue. It is the middle chunk of the game and part of the beginning game, which if you play the game, you know why I have an issue with the first 3 hours of the game. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching. What was your opinion of this game? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Have you reviewed it on Metacritic? What score did you give it? I personally will still give this game an 8 out of 10. Because the game is so good to play, it's hard to give it less than that. Yes, the story let it down. The story stops it from being a 10. But for me, it's still an 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I appreciate it so much. Please like and subscribe, and turn on that notification bell to keep up to date with my content. Please let me know your opinion. It really matters. We have to talk about this game, because it's going to be remembered as one of the most controversial games of all time, which I don't think is actually good for the franchise. And who knows as to whether or not there'll be a third one. I don't think there will be, but that's a topic for another video. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next one. Take it easy.